Have you ever looked at someone and thought, they have it all? Fame, strength, global respect. You know Bruce Lee, the martial arts legend, the man whose lightning-fast kicks became the heartbeat of action cinema. But behind that power was a quiet pain. Behind the cheers was a wall of silence from the very industry he dreamed of breaking into. What if I told you that Bruce Lee, a symbol of unstoppable energy, once stood still, rejected not for his talent, but for the shape of his eyes? You see, Bruce didn't just fight on screen. He fought off screen too. Not with fists, but with his spirit. He fought for a voice in a world that refused to listen. He fought for a place in Hollywood that never wanted to see an Asian man as a hero, only as a sidekick, a caricature, or worse, invisible. Beyond the sharp movements and iconic screams, there was a man who knew what it felt like to be denied. Again and again, he wasn't just chasing roles. He was chasing dignity. Bruce Lee's journey to Hollywood wasn't paved in red carpets. It was built on silent battles, with stereotypes, ignorance, and open discrimination. He was mocked for his accent, passed over for roles he created, and at one point, watched helplessly as a white actor was cast to play a Chinese monk in a show he had conceived himself. But he didn't give up, because Bruce Lee wasn't just trying to become a star. He was trying to change the sky. This is the untold story of Bruce Lee's struggle for recognition. A story that doesn't begin with fame, but with rejection. A story not about defeating enemies in combat, but dismantling barriers with courage. He wasn't just a fighter. He was a visionary. And today, we walk through the doors he kicked open. So before you remember the legend, let's meet the man. Not the icon, but the soul. Because once you hear what he endured, you'll never see Bruce Lee the same way again. Bruce Lee was born in San Francisco in 1940, during a year marked by war, migration, and uncertainty. His father, a Chinese opera star, had taken his family on tour to the United States, but Bruce's roots would grow in the crowded streets of Hong Kong. As a child, he was spirited, restless, and full of energy, the kind of boy who couldn't sit still, but was always curious about the world around him. Have you ever seen a spark in a child and known it would become a fire someday? Bruce's spark was martial arts. At just 13, after facing constant bullying, he began studying Wing Chun under the legendary I.P. Man. Martial arts became his refuge, his teacher, his friend. It taught him discipline and clarity in a world that often felt unstable. But more than that, it gave him identity, a way to express the parts of himself words could not reach. But Bruce wasn't just a fighter. He was an artist of the mind. As he grew older, he dived into philosophy, literature, and dance. Yes, dance. In fact, he won a Hong Kong cha-cha competition in his teens. He was graceful, thoughtful, and intense, a fusion of East and West. By the late 1950s, Bruce was acting in Hong Kong films, not as an action star, but as a dramatic actor in black and white family dramas. He appeared in over 20 films by the time he was 18, yet something always tugged at him, whispering that his destiny lay beyond the harbor skyline, that he was meant for something bigger, something different. So in 1959, with just $100 in his pocket and a dream bigger than most would dare to have, Bruce moved to the United States. Alone, far from home, he settled in Seattle and enrolled in the University of Washington, where he studied philosophy and taught martial arts to support himself. His students weren't just Chinese. They were black, white, Latino, and anyone willing to learn. In a time when racial lines were strictly drawn, Bruce broke them with his bare hands and his open heart. Can you imagine standing in a foreign country, far from your family, with an accent, with no safety net, and still believing in yourself? Bruce believed. not just in kung fu, but in something deeper, that wisdom, discipline, and truth had no color. That martial arts could be a way to connect souls, not just strike bodies. By the early 1960s, word began to spread about this incredible young Chinese man who moved like water and spoke like a poet. His charisma, his speed, and his sharp mind caught the attention of Hollywood talent scouts. He was invited to audition for a role in a new show called The Green Hornet. When Bruce stepped in front of the cameras, everything changed. His movements were too fast for the film to even capture clearly. They had to slow down the footage to show what he was doing. Suddenly, here was something America had never seen before. A leading Asian man who wasn't submissive or stereotyped, but powerful, magnetic, and proud. In 1966, The Green Hornet aired on American television, and Bruce played Kato, the sidekick, but to the audience, he wasn't the sidekick at all. He was the star. The buzz grew. People were amazed by his speed and presence. But Hollywood. Executives weren't listening. Bruce had opened the door, but they still refused to let him fully walk through it. After The Green Hornet ended, Bruce expected new opportunities. Leading roles, new characters. Films centered on an Asian protagonist. But those offers never came. Directors told him to his face that Americans wouldn't accept an Asian hero, that he was too foreign, that he could be a stuntman or a villain, but never the lead. He pitched his own ideas, including a show about a Shaolin monk wandering the American West, an idea that would later be stolen and turned into the series Kung Fu, with a white actor, David Carradine, in the lead. Bruce had given birth to the concept, but was denied his own creation because he looked too Asian. Have you ever seen your dreams taken away from you, only to watch someone else live them out? It broke something in Bruce, but it didn't destroy him. It only made him more certain that he would no longer ask for permission. He would build his own path. In 1971, Bruce returned to Hong Kong. To some, it may have seemed like retreat, but to Bruce, it was a strategic return to his roots. He had heard that The Green Hornet had become a surprise hit in Asia, where fans had nicknamed it the Kato Show. He realized he had something Hollywood didn't see, an audience that believed in him. There, he starred in The Big Boss, a low-budget martial arts film that exploded at the box office. It wasn't just a success, it was a phenomenon. Bruce Lee became a sensation overnight. Suddenly, studios that had ignored him were now chasing him. But even with fame, Bruce wasn't interested in repeating old patterns. He insisted on writing, choreographing, and designing the films himself. He wanted control over how Asian stories were told, with depth, dignity, and pride. He refused to be anyone's puppet. He was done being polite, because Bruce didn't just want to be seen. He wanted to be seen truthfully. Have you ever felt invisible in a room full of people? Not because you lacked talent, but because the world refused to see you beyond your skin. That's what Bruce Lee faced in Hollywood. He wasn't just battling for roles. He was battling for existence. Even after The Green Hornet, even after astounding audiences across cultures, Bruce Lee still couldn't land a major lead role in the United States. Studio executives loved his charisma in private, but feared putting an Asian face in front of American audiences. They told him people wouldn't relate, that a Chinese man couldn't carry a Hollywood film, that martial arts was too ethnic. Imagine hearing that when you know in your bones that you were born to lead, that you weren't made to stand in the background while others lived out your destiny, that you had something the world needed, if only it would listen. Bruce didn't just face rejection, he faced erasure. So he fought back, not with fists, but with vision. He wrote scripts. He designed characters that reflected real Asian strength, dignity, and wisdom. He pushed for stories that didn't reduce his heritage to jokes or mysticism. but celebrated it as something beautiful and powerful. His big idea was a show called The Warrior, a Chinese martial artist, navigating the American frontier, using not just his fighting skills, but his values to navigate a hostile world. But when he pitched it, they smiled politely and walked away. Months later, the show Kung Fu appeared on television. The same storyline, but starring a white actor in yellowface playing a Chinese monk. Have you ever seen someone take your dream, repaint it, and then call it their own? Bruce was devastated, but even then, he didn't lash out publicly. Instead, he turned inward and asked a deeper question. How do I tell my story without asking anyone else for permission? That's when he went back to Hong Kong. But this time, not as a desperate actor, as a man on a mission. In Hong Kong, Bruce created the Big Boss, Fist of Fury, and Way of the Dragon. He choreographed the fights, wrote the stories, and broke every rule the industry had ever followed. His characters weren't just martial artists. They were people standing up against oppression, injustice, and exploitation. Fist of Fury was a film about a Chinese man in Japanese-occupied Shanghai who refuses to bow to those who humiliate his people. In one scene, Bruce destroys a sign outside a park that reads "No dogs or Chinese allowed." That wasn't just a moment in a movie. It was Bruce speaking to the world. He was no longer playing for applause. He was playing for respect. But Bruce wasn't only fighting for Asian pride. He was fighting for authenticity. He believed martial arts in movies had become theatrical and false, more about looking good than being real. He wanted to bring the soul back into it, to show the philosophy behind every move. To Bruce, martial arts wasn't just about violence. It was about expression, discipline, self-respect. It was a way of life, and he wanted Hollywood to understand that. So in Way of the Dragon, Bruce introduced something bold. He faced off with American karate champion Chuck Norris in the Ramon Coliseum East meeting West, not in hatred, but in skill and mutual challenge. The world had never seen anything like it. With every punch, he was rewriting the rules. With every kick, he was changing perceptions. Eventually, his efforts caught the attention of Warner Bros., who agreed to co-produce his first Hollywood Hong Kong crossover film. That film would be Enter the Dragon. Bruce had finally done it. He had kicked open the doors that refused to open for him. And he did it without changing who he was. He stayed true to his culture, his voice, his values. Because Bruce Lee didn't want to become part of Hollywood. He wanted Hollywood to evolve. Do you remember the moment when the world finally saw you for who you truly are? For Bruce Lee, that moment came in 1973 with the release of Enter the Dragon. It wasn't just a movie. It was a revelation. It was the first major Hollywood production to feature an Asian lead, fully centered on Asian culture, values, and philosophy, without apology, without dilution. Bruce wasn't playing a sidekick, a villain, or a stereotype. He was the hero, the leader, the soul of the story. And the world was captivated. Enter the Dragon shattered box office records. It grossed over $350 million globally on a modest budget of less than $1 million. But its true value wasn't in numbers. It was in impact. For the first time, children from every part of the globe, black, white, Asian, Latino, looked at the screen and saw someone who moved like lightning, thought like a philosopher, and looked like them. Bruce Lee had arrived. But more importantly, he had brought the generation with him. Tragically, Bruce would never get to see the full impact of that moment. Just 6 days before Enter the Dragon premiered, he passed away unexpectedly at the age of 32. Can you imagine lighting the torch and not being there to see the fire spread? His death stunned the world. Fans mourned not just the loss of a star, but the loss of a spirit, a thinker, a rebel, a builder. And yet, even in death, Bruce Lee's voice only grew louder. Because Bruce had never just been about physical strength. His true power was in his mind, his philosophy. He called it Jeet Kune Do, or the way of the intercepting fist. But it wasn't just a fighting system. It was a way of life. He believed in flowing like water, in adapting, in expressing the truth without fear. He believed that identity was not a cage, but a canvas. That race, class, and borders could not define a human being's worth. Absorb what is useful, discard what is useless, and add what is uniquely your own. That was his creed. His teachings went beyond martial artists. They reached poets, athletes, teachers, filmmakers, leaders, anyone who had ever been told, "You can't." Bruce answered that with, "Watch me." Can you feel the power in that? Today, Bruce Lee's presence still lingers, not just on posters or in movies, but in the quiet shifts happening across the world. Turn on your screen, and you'll see more Asian faces than ever before leading films, winning awards, telling their own stories. This is not an accident. This is the ripple of a man who once stood alone, demanding to be seen. From Crazy Rich Asians to Shang-Chi, from Michelle Yeoh's Oscar win to the rise of global Asian cinema, Bruce Lee's dream is finally blooming. But the fight he started? It's far from over. Because the struggle for representation is not just about casting calls. It's about being heard, being respected, being allowed to be complex, human, flawed, heroic all at once. Bruce Lee challenged the world to stop defining people by their race and start seeing them by their light. And that message still needs to be heard in boardrooms, in classrooms, in every place where bias whispers and courage must shout. Have you ever wondered how many voices are still waiting to be heard today? How many dreams are still locked behind invisible walls? Bruce Lee's life tells us those walls can be broken. But it takes more than strength. It takes vision. It takes someone willing to be first, to be laughed at, ignored, rejected, and still to keep walking. That's why Bruce Lee matters even more now than ever. Because his story is not just history, it's a mirror. A call to keep creating, even when the world doesn't clap. To keep standing, even when the stage feels too big. To keep speaking, even when the silence feels heavy. Bruce Lee proved that one voice, when true and relentless, can shift the course of an entire culture. And if one voice can do that, what about yours? Bruce Lee didn't just change movies. He changed minds. He showed the world that one person bold enough to be different can break through walls built over centuries. His story is not just about martial arts. It's about identity, courage, and refusing to stay silent. If his journey touched something in your heart today, take a moment to reflect. What barriers are you facing in your own life? What dreams are you still holding back? Bruce Lee taught us to be like water, to adapt, to persist, and to never give up on our truth. So if this story inspired you, let it flow forward. Comment below. Share your thoughts. Who inspires you to keep going? And if you believe more people need to hear stories like this, stories that empower and awaken, then like this video, share it with a friend, and subscribe for more. Because sometimes, one story is all it takes to ignite change. And maybe yours is next.